The coffee maker's cheerful beeping pierced through the morning haze as I fumbled for my temporal stabilizer badge, wondering why Monday mornings felt the same whether you lived on Earth or worked with beings from 17 different star systems. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked about as enthusiastic as a deflated hover balloon, which seemed appropriate considering I'd spent most of Sunday trying to explain to my mother via quantum link why dating apps designed for humans didn't work when half your coworkers had tentacles. "Good morning, beautiful people of New Geneva," chirped the city's AI announcer through my apartment speakers, its artificially cheerful voice making me wince. Today's weather is a pleasant 22 degrees with a 30% chance of dimensional rifts opening near the harbor district. Citizens are advised to carry umbrella shields and avoid making direct eye contact with any geometric shapes that shouldn't exist. I grabbed my coffee, real earth coffee, not that synthetic swill they served at the Institute, and headed out into the bustling streets where hover cars weaved between walking pedestrians and the occasional Centaurian who moved like a graceful 8-foot praying mantis in a business suit. The morning commute had adapted remarkably well to interspecies integration, though I still couldn't get used to the sight of Rigelian teenagers skateboarding on boards that defied gravity while their parents floated nearby in meditation bubbles. The Galactic Relations Institute rose before me like a crystal flower blooming from the earth, its bioarchitectural design shifting subtly in response to the building's mood. Today it seemed particularly caffeinated, which I took as a good sign. Security scanners hummed as they verified my DNA, checked for temporal anomalies, and probably judged my choice of breakfast burrito. "Morning, Charlie," called out Reggie from behind the quantum reception desk, his 4 arms managing to simultaneously answer calls, sort mail, and play what appeared to be three-dimensional chess with himself. "Big day today, the Etherian delegation is here for the cultural exchange ceremony." "Etherians," I muttered, trying to remember what I'd read about them in the briefing materials I'd definitely meant to study. "Those are the ones who look almost human except for the ears, right?" "That's them. Very formal, very precise, very likely to file a diplomatic complaint if you sneeze wrong." Reggie's third arm handed me a data pad. "You're on communications duty for the ceremony. Try not to accidentally declare war or anything." The Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with activity as species from across the galaxy mingled in a carefully choreographed dance of diplomacy. Holographic translators floated overhead like helpful butterflies, converting languages in real time while atmospheric processors adjusted the air composition to accommodate everyone from methane-breathing Nexarians to the silicon-based crystallites who communicated through harmonic resonance. I settled into my workstation, a sleek console that looked like it belonged in a starship but mostly just monitored communication frequencies and made sure nobody was accidentally broadcasting their grocery lists to the Andromeda Galaxy. The morning proceeded with typical bureaucratic efficiency until the Etherian delegation entered. They moved with liquid grace, each step seeming choreographed by cosmic forces. Their leader. For lack of a better term, since Etherian hierarchy apparently operated on principles that required 3 advanced degrees in xenosociology to understand, possessed an otherworldly beauty that made the entire room fall silent. Her hair cascaded like starlight, her features delicate yet commanding, and her ears swept back in elegant points that caught the light like precious metal. "Delegates from Etherian Prime," announced the ceremonial herald, his voice echoing through translation matrices, "we welcome Whisper of Stars and her honored companions to New Geneva." The ceremony commenced with the usual pageantry, speeches about friendship between worlds, presentations of gifts that required hazmat protocols to handle safely, and a musical performance by the combined species orchestra that sounded like what would happen if a whale learned to play jazz on a cosmic synthesizer. I focused on monitoring the communication feeds, making sure no stray signals interfered with the proceedings. That's when everything went sideways faster than a proximate after too much fermented plankton. The first sign of trouble was my console screaming like a banshee having an existential crisis. Energy readings spiked across multiple spectrums as something materialized in the center of the hall, a shimmering distortion that hurt to look at directly. Security protocols activated instantly, force fields crackling to life like electric soap bubbles while alarm klaxons wailed in 17 different languages. "Phase shifter," someone shouted. "Assassin." The Etherian guards moved with inhuman speed, their biomechanical armor flowing like liquid mercury as weapons materialized from seemingly nowhere. But the distortion was already moving, a barely visible presence that darted between dimensions like a deadly ghost. In the chaos, I found myself frozen at my station, watching disaster unfold in slow motion while my brain helpfully reminded me that I'd skipped breakfast and really should have read those briefing materials. The assassin struck with precision that spoke of careful planning, energy weapons discharging in bursts that left afterimages burned into my retinas. And then, impossibly, Whisper of Stars broke away from her protective detail. Her guards shouted in their melodic language. Probably something between, "Get back here," and, "We're all going to be court-martialed," but she ignored them completely. Instead, she ran directly toward me, her pointed ears pressed back against her head, her luminous eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my coffee cup rattle in my suddenly shaking hands. "Charles Matthew Rodriguez," she said in perfect English, her voice like music played on instruments made of captured moonbeams, "I require your assistance." "I'm sorry, what?" I managed, certain I'd misheard because there was absolutely no reason why an alien princess, diplomat, whatever, should know my full name or think I could help with anything more complex than explaining why humans put pineapple on pizza. The assassin's form solidified for a moment, revealing a figure in stealth armor that bent light around itself like a funhouse mirror. Energy bolts sizzled past my head, leaving the air smelling of ozone and burnt ambition. Whisper of Stars stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint luminescence beneath her skin, the way her presence seemed to make the very air shimmer with possibility. "Your bioresonance signature," she continued, as if discussing the weather rather than standing in the middle of what was rapidly becoming a firefight, "it creates a harmonic frequency that disrupts quantum targeting systems." My what now? Behind her, the Etherian guard captain. A walking mountain of scars and barely contained violence wrapped in armor that could probably tank a meteor, was advancing with weapons that hummed like angry wasps. The assassin flickered between dimensions, seeking an angle of attack, while security forces converged from all directions. In simpler terms, Whisper of Stars said, actually smiling as explosions erupted around us, "You make it very difficult for people to kill me accurately." That's... I searched for the right word as a stray energy blast vaporized my coffee mug, weirdly specific. The next few moments blurred together like a fever dream scripted by someone with a peculiar sense of humor. The assassin made one final desperate lunge, phase-shifting through 3 dimensions and materializing directly behind Whisper of Stars with a weapon that looked like it could delete someone from existence. But as soon as they appeared within 10 feet of me, their aim went haywire, the deadly energy bolt careening off harmlessly into the ceiling where it opened a small portal to what appeared to be someone's kitchen. The guard captain's net launcher, because apparently the future still believed in the time-honored tradition of throwing nets at problems, caught the assassin mid-phase, quantum entanglement keeping them locked in normal space long enough for the security team to pile on like they were tackling a particularly dangerous football. In the sudden silence that followed, broken only by the distant sound of sirens and someone apologizing profusely in what sounded like Vulcan, Whisper of Stars turned to me with an expression of serene satisfaction. "Thank you," she said, as if I'd done anything more than stand there looking confused while holding a broken coffee cup. "I literally didn't do anything." "Precisely." Her smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed to catch light like tiny stars. "Your inability to do anything in a crisis creates a quantum uncertainty field that makes precision targeting impossible. It is quite remarkable." Around us, the assembly hall buzzed with activity as medics tended to the wounded, investigators examined the captured assassin, and diplomats tried to pretend this was all perfectly normal. The Etherian guard captain approached us, his armor retracting to reveal a face that looked like it had been carved from granite by someone having a bad day. "Honored Whisper," he said in heavily accented English, I should not have trusted my instincts." She interrupted, her tone gentle but firm. "Should not have sought protection from the one being in this room whose mere presence creates a defensive field." The captain looked at me as if I were a particularly disappointing piece of military equipment. "This human possesses no combat training, no enhancement technologies, no tactical awareness whatsoever. True, Whisper of Stars agreed cheerfully. He also spent the entire assassination attempt worrying about his coffee and wondering if he remembered to feed his neighbor's cat. Such thoughts create a neural pattern that resonates at exactly the right frequency to disrupt quantum targeting matrices. I stared at them both. Wait, how did you know about the cat? But before anyone could answer, the diplomatic corps descended like a flock of very polite vultures, surrounding us with forms to fill out, statements to give, and what would undoubtedly become the most interesting incident report in the history of interstellar relations. As they led us away for debriefing, I caught Whisper of Stars looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Curiosity mixed with something deeper, like someone who had found an answer to a question she'd been carrying for a very long time. 3 days after the incident, I found myself sitting in what could only be described as the galaxy's most uncomfortable waiting room, watching a Rigelian businessman argue with a vending machine that had apparently achieved sentience and decided to pursue a career in philosophy rather than dispensing snacks. The machine kept asking profound questions about the nature of hunger while the businessman just wanted his protein cubes. The desire for sustenance, the machine pontificated in a voice like grinding gears wrapped in velvet, is merely a manifestation of the cosmic void within us all. Have you considered addressing your existential emptiness instead? I just want lunch, the Rigelian clicked in exasperation, his mandibles making sounds like castanets having an argument. The high-security diplomatic compound looked like someone had taken a 5-star hotel and asked a paranoid AI to redesign it. Every surface gleamed with scanners, every corner housed defensive systems that tracked movement with the enthusiasm of overly attentive pets, and the air itself seemed to hum with enough energy shields to stop a small asteroid. Or a large asteroid. Possibly several asteroids having a party. My escort, Agent Williams, possessed the unique combination of looking like she could bench press a hover car while simultaneously organizing the galaxy's most efficient bake sale. She'd been trying to explain why I was there for the past hour using words like anomalous bioresonance and unprecedented xenological compatibility, which mostly made me wonder if they were politely telling me I was some kind of cosmic weirdo. So let me get this straight, I said, watching the philosophical vending machine begin an impromptu lecture on the metaphysics of artificial flavor enhancement. I'm here because my brain waves make it hard for people to shoot aliens accurately. That's a gross oversimplification, Agent Williams replied, consulting a data pad that probably contained my entire life history including my 3rd grade report on why dogs are better than cats. Your neural patterns create a quantum interference field that disrupts targeting systems, but only when you're in proximity to certain bioenergetic signatures. Certain bioenergetic signatures being Etherians. Specifically, Whisper of Stars. The waiting room doors hissed open with the kind of sound effects that suggested someone had put a lot of thought into making them seem important. Whisper of Stars entered flanked by 2 guards who looked like they could arm wrestle gravity and win. She wore flowing robes that seemed to shift color depending on the angle of view, and her pointed ears were adorned with what appeared to be tiny crystalline devices that pulsed with soft light. Charles, she said, her voice carrying that same musical quality that made my name sound like a symphony composed by celestial beings with excellent taste in acoustics. I apologize for the circumstances of our reunion. No problem, I managed, trying not to stare at the way the light seemed to bend around her like she was standing in her own personal aurora. I was just learning about my apparently malfunctioning brain. She laughed, a sound like silver bells having a delightful conversation with a babbling brook. Your brain functions perfectly. It simply operates on frequencies that create harmonious discord with Etherian biorhythms. One of her guards, whose name tag read, Captain Stoneface McGillicuddy, in what I assumed was a translation error, stepped forward with the kind of expression usually reserved for people who've discovered their coffee has been replaced with motor oil. Honored Whisper, the security protocols clearly state. The security protocols, she interrupted gently, were written by beings who never encountered a human whose thought patterns could destabilize quantum targeting matrices by wondering about whether turtles dream. Do turtles dream? I asked, because apparently my brain had decided this was the perfect moment for philosophical inquiry. See. Whisper of Stars gestured at me with obvious delight. He does it unconsciously. The quantum uncertainty generated by such questions creates a protective field that extends approximately 3 meters in all directions. Agent Williams cleared her throat with the kind of sound that suggested years of dealing with situations that defied rational explanation. Ms. Whisper of Stars, we need to discuss the security implications of these interactions. There have been 3 more attempts on your life since the Assembly Hall incident. Attempts that failed, Whisper of Stars pointed out, settling into a chair that immediately adjusted itself to accommodate her posture with the kind of eager helpfulness usually associated with golden retrievers. Each assassin suffered the same targeting difficulties when approaching Charles's vicinity. About that, I said, feeling like someone who'd wandered into the wrong movie and discovered they were apparently the star. How exactly did you know my name during the first attack? We'd never met. Her ears tilted forward slightly, a gesture I was beginning to recognize as the Etherian equivalent of someone looking pleased with themselves. Etherian society places great emphasis on bioharmonic compatibility. We possess crystalline devices that can detect resonant frequencies across vast distances. She touched one of the glowing ornaments adorning her ear, which immediately projected a holographic display showing what appeared to be a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with tiny pulsing dots scattered throughout. Most of the dots glowed blue or green, but one, located precisely at Earth, pulsed with warm golden light. Your biosignature has been detectable from Etherian Prime for approximately 7 years, she continued, as if this was perfectly normal and not at all the kind of thing that would require several years of therapy to process. The Council of Harmonies has been curious about the source. 7 years. I tried to remember what I'd been doing 7 years ago and came up with the vague recollection of working at a different job and being equally confused by most aspects of existence. That's around when I started working with alien technologies. Precisely. Exposure to extradimensional energy fields can sometimes activate latent bioharmonic potential in certain individuals. She paused, studying my expression with the kind of attention usually reserved for particularly interesting scientific specimens. In layman's terms, you developed psychic static. The philosophical vending machine chose that moment to deliver a stirring soliloquy about the futility of material desires, causing the Rigelian businessman to finally give up and storm off muttering about bringing his own lunch. Agent Williams made notes on her data pad with the grim efficiency of someone documenting the heat death of the universe. So, I said slowly, I'm basically a walking jamming device that only works on space elves. That is remarkably accurate, Whisper of Stars agreed, seeming genuinely impressed by my grasp of the situation. Though we prefer Etherians with enhanced auditory appendages to space elves. Captain Stoneface McGillicuddy stepped forward again, his armor making sounds like a percussion section having an existential crisis. The tactical implications remain concerning. If hostile forces discover the nature of this protection, they may attempt to eliminate the human to compromise your safety. Or, Whisper of Stars said with the kind of smile that suggested she'd already thought this through, they may attempt to replicate the effect, not realizing that Charles's particular brand of quantum uncertainty cannot be artificially reproduced. She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show what appeared to be brain-wave patterns dancing across the screen like cosmic jazz music having a conversation with advanced mathematics. My patterns looked like someone had asked a drunk octopus to conduct a symphony orchestra during an earthquake. Multiple intelligence agencies have attempted to study this phenomenon, Agent Williams added, consulting her data pad again. The results have been entertaining. How so? The Centaurian Science Ministry spent 6 months trying to induce similar neural patterns in volunteer subjects. They succeeded in creating 3 minor temporal paradoxes, 1 accidental teleportation incident, and a researcher who now speaks only in haikus about the existential nature of cheese. That seems about right, I said, watching my brain waves continue their chaotic dance across the display. My thoughts tend to have that effect on people. Whisper of Stars leaned forward, her luminous eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made the air between us seem to shimmer with possibility. Would you be willing to participate in a deeper compatibility analysis? Etherian science has developed methods for exploring bioharmonic resonance that could benefit both our species. Will it hurt? Only if you're afraid of discovering that your consciousness operates on frequencies that most sentient beings would consider impossible. So, Tuesday, I replied, which made her laugh again. The next hour involved being connected to various crystalline devices that hummed with the kind of energy that made my teeth itch in interesting ways. Etherian technicians moved around me with the careful precision of people defusing a bomb made of pure mathematics, while Whisper of Stars observed from a control panel that looked like it had been grown rather than built. Fascinating, she murmured, watching readouts that meant nothing to me but apparently contained the secrets of the universe. Your neural pathways process information in patterns that create standing waves in local quantum fields. It's as if your consciousness exists slightly out of phase with normal reality. That explains so much about my dating life, I said, which caused one of the technicians to nearly drop a device that was probably worth more than my apartment. The analysis revealed that my brain apparently generated what the Etherians termed beneficial chaos, a rare form of quantum uncertainty that created protective fields around compatible biosignatures while simultaneously making it nearly impossible for hostile targeting systems to achieve locks. The effect was completely unconscious and seemed to strengthen when I was relaxed or thinking about mundane topics. So the more confused and ordinary I am, I said, watching the data streams flow like rivers of light, the better the protection works. Essentially, yes. Whisper of Stars moved closer, her presence making the quantum reading spike in ways that had the technicians exchanging excited whispers. Your natural state of benign bewilderment creates the perfect defensive matrix. I should put that on my resume. As the session concluded, Captain Stoneface McGillicuddy approached with the kind of expression that suggested he'd been asked to guard a particularly dangerous butterfly. The Council has reached a decision regarding ongoing security protocols. Which is, Charles Matthew Rodriguez will be assigned as primary bioharmonic protection specialist for the duration of Whisper of Stars' diplomatic mission. I stared at them. You want me to be her bodyguard? You want you to be yourself, Whisper of Stars corrected, in proximity to me, while trained professionals handle the actual guarding. That I can do, I said, then paused. What exactly does this diplomatic mission involve? Her smile took on a quality that suggested adventures beyond my comprehension were about to unfold. Cultural exchange, technological cooperation, and the prevention of an interstellar incident that could destabilize 3 galaxy sectors. Sounds like a typical Wednesday. My new living quarters in a diplomatic compound came equipped with everything a person could need to survive an interstellar incident, including a bathroom mirror that offered daily affirmations in 17 languages and a coffee maker that had apparently achieved enlightenment. The machine hummed contentedly as it brewed what it claimed was coffee transcendent, which tasted exactly like regular coffee but somehow made me feel like I understood the universe's sense of humor. Good morning, Charles, the mirror said cheerfully as I attempted to make my hair look less like I'd been electrocuted by a friendly lightning bolt. Today's affirmation comes from the Arcturian philosophical tradition. One who walks with confusion walks with wisdom, for certainty is the enemy of growth. That's either profound or complete nonsense, I told my reflection. In Arcturian philosophy, those are the same thing. The past week had fallen into a routine that would have seemed surreal a month ago but now felt oddly normal. Mornings involved checking in with Agent Williams, who updated me on the latest assassination attempts with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. Afternoons were spent with Whisper of Stars, learning about Etherian culture while my quantum uncertainty field kept her safe from increasingly creative murder plots. The Phase Walker Guild is particularly persistent, Agent Williams noted, reviewing her data pad over breakfast in the compound's cafeteria, where the chef was a reformed pirate who made pancakes shaped like various spacecraft. Yesterday's attempt involved a temporal assassin who tried to kill you last Tuesday. How did that work out? He got trapped in a causality loop. He still last Tuesday, somewhere around 3:47 p.m., trying to figure out why his targeting system keeps locking onto a hot dog cart instead of you. I bit into a pancake shaped like a Regellian cruiser, which tasted surprisingly good despite looking like it should require a flight plan. So my confusion extends to time travel now? Apparently. The quantum uncertainty field doesn't just affect space-time coordinates, it makes probability itself get confused about which reality it's supposed to be operating in. The cafeteria's ambient music system, which had been playing something that sounded like jazz performed by sentient mathematics, suddenly shifted to what could only be described as orchestral dubstep. This meant Whisper of Stars was approaching, since the compound systems had learned to detect her biosignature and automatically adjusted the environment to accommodate Etherian sensory preferences. She entered wearing robes that seemed to be cut from crystallized starlight, her pointed ears adorned with new harmonic devices that created tiny auroras when she moved. The effect should have been overwhelming, but spending time with her had taught me that Etherians just naturally existed at a level of aesthetic perfection that made regular reality look slightly underdressed. "Good morning, Charles," she said, settling into the chair across from me with that fluid grace that made simple movements look like choreographed dance. "I trust you slept well despite the dimensional rifts." "The what now?" Agent Williams glanced up from her pancakes. "Didn't you notice your apartment flickering between realities around 2 a.m.? The overnight shift was taking bets on which dimension you'd wake up in. I thought that was just the air conditioning acting up." I paused, fork halfway to my mouth. Should I be concerned that I can't tell the difference between dimensional instability and minor appliance malfunctions? "On the contrary," Whisper of Stars said, her eyes brightening with what I'd learned was the Etherian equivalent of scientific excitement, "your inability to distinguish between normal and anomalous events is precisely what makes the protection field so effective. Quantum uncertainty thrives on cognitive dissonance." The morning briefing took place in a conference room that looked like someone had asked a committee of artists and engineers to design the perfect space for discussing impossible things. Holographic displays showed threat assessments, diplomatic schedules, and what appeared to be a three-dimensional chess game between Agent Williams and the compound security AI. "The Nexarian Collective has formally complained about our interference with their assassination contract," Agent Williams reported, moving a piece that looked like a tiny spaceship across the holographic board. "Apparently, the quantum uncertainty field is violating several laws of physics they consider sacred. They can file a complaint with the Department of Cosmic Irony," Captain Stoneface McGillicuddy replied, though I was beginning to suspect his real name was actually something like Robert, and the translation matrix just had a sense of humor about military types. Whisper of Stars activated a control panel that materialized from the table's surface like it was growing from the molecular level. "The Council of Harmonies has requested a demonstration of the bioharmonic compatibility for the visiting Zephyrian trade delegation." "What kind of demonstration?" I asked, immediately suspicious of anything that required me to demonstrate anything to anyone. "Nothing dangerous," she assured me, which in my experience was exactly what people said right before asking you to do something that would definitely end up on the evening news. "Simply a controlled interaction while Etherian bioscientists monitor the quantum field fluctuations." The demonstration took place in what the compound called the Cultural Exchange Amphitheater, which was basically a large room where various species could gather to watch other species do inexplicable things for diplomatic purposes. The Zephyrian delegation had arrived in full ceremonial gear, which involved a lot of metallic fabric and headpieces that looked like abstract sculptures having philosophical debates. "The human appears unremarkable," observed the lead Zephyrian delegate through their translation device, which rendered their crystalline voice into English with a slight accent that suggested sophisticated disappointment. "Are we certain this demonstration will prove enlightening?" "Charles," Whisper of Stars said softly, "would you mind thinking about something particularly confusing while I activate the bioharmonic resonance display?" "I can do confusing." I settled into the observation chair, which immediately began scanning me with invisible beams that made my skin tingle. "How about the fact that we have faster-than-light travel but my apartment's ice maker still doesn't work properly?" The effect was immediate and spectacular. Whisper of Stars began to glow with soft luminescence as her bioenergy field became visible, creating patterns of light that danced through the air like aurora made of pure music. But more importantly, the targeting systems that had been discreetly aimed at her from various points around the room began to malfunction in increasingly creative ways. One system locked onto a potted plant that suddenly began growing at an alarming rate. Another started tracking the room's ventilation system, causing the air conditioning to play what sounded like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony in B-flat confusion. A third targeting array became convinced that gravity was an enemy combatant and began firing at the floor. "Fascinating," murmured one of the Zephyrian scientists, their metallic features reflecting the light show Whisper of Stars had become. "The quantum uncertainty field appears to operate on principles that actively defy measurement." "That's because Charles isn't trying to create the effect," Whisper of Stars explained, her voice taking on harmonics that made the air itself seem to sing. "He's simply existing in a state of benign bewilderment about the nature of reality." "The ice maker thing really is confusing," I added helpfully. "I mean, it makes ice, but only in cubes that are somehow both too big and too small simultaneously." The quantum reading spiked, causing several monitoring devices to start arguing with each other in electronic voices about the philosophical implications of ice cube geometry. Agent Williams took notes with the grim satisfaction of someone documenting evidence for the universe's eventual trial for crimes against logic. After the demonstration, the Zephyrian delegation spent an hour trying to understand how someone could weaponize confusion without actually intending to create weapons. Their conclusion, delivered with the kind of diplomatic precision that suggested centuries of practice at being politely baffled, was that humans represented a fascinating paradox that they would need to study extensively. "The implications for defensive technologies are significant," the lead delegate noted, their translation device adding subtle overtones of scientific excitement. "A being who can create protection through the absence of intention challenges our fundamental understanding of cause and effect." "Don't overthink it," I advised. "That seems to make the whole thing work worse." Later that evening, Whisper of Stars and I found ourselves in the compound's observation deck, watching the city lights blend with the stars in a display that made New Geneva look like a terrestrial constellation. The deck's atmospheric processors had adjusted the air to recreate the feeling of her homeworld, which apparently involved more humidity and a subtle hint of ozone that smelled like impending rain. "Your people fascinate mine," she said, her luminous eyes reflecting the city lights in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. "Etherians spend centuries learning to control our bioenergy fields, to harmonize our consciousness with cosmic frequencies. Yet you achieve something we consider impossible by simply not trying to achieve anything at all." "Maybe that's the point," I suggested, watching a hover taxi navigate between buildings while its driver apparently argued with the GPS about the most scenic route to nowhere in particular. "Sometimes the best way to accomplish something is to accidentally stumble into it while thinking about something else entirely." She laughed, that musical sound that made the air around us shimmer with harmonics visible only in peripheral vision. "Is that a human philosophical principle? It's more like a human survival strategy. We're not smart enough to solve most problems directly, so we just muddle around until we accidentally find solutions while looking for coffee." "Coffee," she repeated thoughtfully. "Your species' relationship with that particular beverage appears to be central to your bioharmonic patterns." "Coffee is basically the foundation of human civilization," I confirmed. "Everything else is just elaborate scaffolding we've built around the fundamental need for caffeinated motivation." The observation deck's ambient lighting shifted as the compound's AI detected our conversation and adjusted the environment for what it apparently classified as romantic intellectual discourse. Soft music began playing. Something that sounded like interstellar wind chimes having a philosophical discussion with distant thunder. "Charles," Whisper of Stars said, turning to face me with an expression that seemed to contain depths I couldn't begin to fathom, "there is something I must tell you about the true nature of our compatibility." "That sounds ominous." "The bioharmonic resonance between our species isn't random. According to our oldest records, it was predicted by Etherian seers over 1,000 years ago. A convergence between our people and another species whose consciousness operates on frequencies of beautiful chaos. I stared at her. You're telling me that alien fortune tellers predicted I would exist? Not you specifically. But they foresaw a time when Etherian survival would depend on alliance with beings whose thoughts create protective uncertainty fields through the simple act of existing in a state of good-natured confusion about everything. So I'm fulfilling ancient alien prophecy by being perpetually bewildered? Essentially, yes. I considered this information while watching the city's traffic control system apparently give up and allow the hover cars to organize themselves into what looked like an impromptu aerial ballet. That's either the most flattering or most insulting thing anyone's ever said about my mental state. In Etherian culture, she said with a smile that seemed to contain starlight, prophecy and insult are often the same thing. The emergency klaxons had been wailing for exactly 17 minutes when I realized that this particular crisis was significantly more complicated than the usual Tuesday assassination attempt. Agent Williams burst into my quarters while I was trying to convince my enlightened coffee maker to produce something stronger than its usual transcendent brew. We have a problem, she announced, which in my experience was government speak for, the universe is about to end and somehow it's related to you. How big a problem are we talking? I asked, watching my coffee maker contemplate the philosophical implications of espresso. Scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is minor diplomatic incident and 10 is accidentally started an intergalactic war. 15. The situation room buzzed with the kind of controlled chaos that suggested very intelligent people were working very hard to prevent something catastrophically stupid from happening. Holographic displays showed star maps dotted with angry red indicators, while various species representatives argued in languages that sounded like musical instruments having nervous breakdowns. Captain Stoneface McGillicuddy, whose actual name, I'd finally learned, was Robert Fitzpatrick, though the translation matrix apparently found this less intimidating than his preferred military designation, stood at the center of the chaos like a particularly grim lighthouse in a storm of bureaucratic panic. The situation is this, he began without preamble. 3 separate factions have discovered the nature of your protective effect and decided that controlling or eliminating you is the key to dominating Etherian space. That seems like poor strategic planning, I observed. I can barely control my own laundry schedule. The Nexarian Collective has mobilized a fleet armed with reality displacement weapons, Agent Williams continued, consulting her data pad with the expression of someone reading her own obituary. The Centaurian Science Ministry has deployed temporal manipulation devices to try accessing alternate timelines where you never existed. And the Rigelian Defense Corps has surrounded the compound with quantum phase tanks that can apparently shoot through dimensions. Whisper of Stars entered the situation room like a walking aurora, her bioenergy field visibly agitated in ways that made the air shimmer with stressed harmonics. Her pointed ears were pressed back against her head, and the crystalline devices adorning them pulsed with rapid, anxious light. The Council of Harmonies has reached a decision, she announced, her musical voice carrying undertones that sounded like distant thunder. They're prepared to sever diplomatic relations with humanity rather than risk the destabilization of 3 galaxy sectors. So we're basically looking at the end of human-alien relations because I have weird brain waves. I summarized. Essentially, yes. I sat down heavily in a chair that immediately began scanning my stress levels and offering helpful suggestions for relaxation techniques in soothing electronic tones. This is like being blamed for a war because you sneezed at the wrong moment. Actually, Agent Williams said, that's happened before. The Tau Ceti incident of 2387 started when Ambassador Henderson sneezed during a sacred ceremony and accidentally triggered a religious schism that lasted 3 decades. The tactical displays updated with new information that made everyone in the room look like they'd been asked to solve advanced mathematics while being chased by angry bees. 3 separate fleets were converging on Earth, each armed with technologies designed to either capture or eliminate the source of the quantum uncertainty field that protected Whisper of Stars. Options? Captain Fitzpatrick asked with the tone of someone who already knew the answer would be either none or all terrible. We could evacuate Charles to a secure location, suggested the Zephyrian military attaché, their crystalline features reflecting the holographic displays and patterns that looked like abstract anxiety. Though any location containing him would become a target. We could attempt to replicate the effect artificially, offered one of the human scientists, though previous attempts resulted in dimensional rifts, temporal paradoxes, and that unfortunate incident with the researcher who now exists only on Tuesdays. Or, Whisper of Stars said quietly, her luminous eyes fixed on the star maps showing the approaching fleets, we could trust in the very unpredictability that created this situation to resolve it. Everyone turned to stare at her with the kind of expression usually reserved for people who suggest jumping off cliffs might be good exercise. Explain, Captain Fitzpatrick demanded. Charles's quantum uncertainty field operates on principles of beneficial chaos. The more desperate the situation becomes, the more unpredictable the protective effects become. What if, instead of hiding from this crisis, we embraced it? You want to intentionally make the situation worse? Agent Williams asked. I want to trust that chaos has its own wisdom, Whisper of Stars replied, moving closer to me until the air between us began to dance with visible harmonics. Charles, what would you do if this were just another ordinary Tuesday? I thought about it while watching the tactical displays update with increasingly dire threat assessments. Probably complain about my coffee, wonder why 3 different alien fleets were ruining my morning commute, and ask if anyone had bothered to just explain that I'm not actually a weapon, just a guy who thinks too much about ice makers. Perfect, she said with a smile that made the lights in the room seem brighter. Let's try that. What followed was either the most brilliant diplomatic strategy in galactic history or the most elaborate practical joke ever played on the concept of international relations. Against all tactical advice, security protocols, and basic common sense, we established communication channels with all 3 approaching fleets and invited their commanders to a video conference. The first commander to respond was Admiral Vexthera of the Nexarian Collective, whose species looked like someone had crossed a squid with a chess grandmaster and then given the result a really bad attitude. She appeared on the holographic display with the kind of expression that suggested she'd rather be conquering something than talking about it. Humans, she began, her translated voice carrying undertones of existential disdain, surrender the quantum anomaly known as Charles Rodriguez and we will spare your pathetic planet. Here's the thing, I said, leaning into the camera with the casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans, I'm not actually an anomaly. I'm just confused about most things, which apparently creates defensive fields around space elves. I mean, Etherians with enhanced auditory appendages. Admiral Vexthera's expression shifted through several phases of bewilderment. You admit to being confused? Oh, constantly. Right now I'm confused about why you think capturing one bewildered human is worth mobilizing an entire fleet. That seems like using a supernova to light a candle. The quantum uncertainty reading spiked as my genuine confusion about the tactical situation began affecting the targeting systems of ships still several light-years away. According to the displays, Admiral Vexthera's flagship had just accidentally locked its weapons onto its own navigation system. The second commander, Professor Zilquat of the Centaurian Science Ministry, appeared as a shimmering energy construct that spoke in mathematical equations translated into condescending academic jargon. The temporal displacement experiments indicate that eliminating your timeline would restore quantum stability to the affected sectors. But wouldn't eliminating my timeline create a paradox where you never had a reason to eliminate my timeline in the first place? I asked. That seems like it would just make everything more confusing. Professor Zilquat paused, their energy form flickering as they processed the logical implications. That is, a valid point. However, the mathematical models clearly indicate. Do the mathematical models account for the possibility that math itself might get confused when applied to someone whose existence doesn't make mathematical sense? I interrupted. Because I failed algebra twice, and reality seems to have adapted by making numbers give up whenever I'm involved. The third commander, General Crixton of the Rigelian Defense Corps, had been listening with the patient attention of someone watching a cosmic joke unfold in real time. His mandibles clicked in what the translation matrix identified as either amusement or mild hysteria. "Let me understand this correctly," he said, his insectoid features managing to convey a level of exasperation that transcended species barriers. "We have mobilized 3 fleets, destabilized interstellar relations, and threatened to end human-alien diplomatic contact because of one human who protects aliens by being confused about ice makers." "Pretty much," I confirmed. Though to be fair, the ice maker situation really is perplexing. It's like it exists in a quantum superposition between functioning and broken. Whisper of Stars stepped into camera range, her bioenergy field creating patterns of light that made the holographic display look like it was broadcasting from inside a star. "Honored commanders, perhaps we've been approaching this situation with too much logic. Charles's protective effect operates on principles of beneficial chaos. The more we try to control or understand it, the more unpredictable it becomes. What do you propose?" Admiral Vexthera asked, though her tone suggested she was beginning to suspect the answer would involve more confusion rather than less. "That we declare Charles a living diplomatic sanctuary," Whisper of Stars replied. "His quantum uncertainty field doesn't just protect me, it could protect diplomatic relations between any species. A neutral zone that moves wherever he goes, maintained by the simple fact that hostile action becomes impossible in the presence of someone who's genuinely confused about why anyone would want to fight in the first place." The 3 commanders exchanged glances across light years of space, their expressions suggesting they were simultaneously appalled and intrigued by the concept. "You're proposing to solve an interstellar crisis by institutionalizing confusion?" Professor Zilquat asked. "I'm proposing we recognize that some problems can't be solved through force or logic," Whisper of Stars replied. "Sometimes the best solution is to stop trying to solve the problem and start appreciating the unexpected benefits of not understanding it." General Crickston's mandibles clicked in what was definitely amusement now. A human peace treaty enforced by perpetual bewilderment. The poets will either love this or declare war on the concept of narrative coherence. The final negotiations took place over the course of 6 hours, during which I mostly sat in a comfortable chair, drank transcendent coffee, and provided occasional commentary about the illogical nature of interstellar politics while the quantum uncertainty field made various weapons systems throughout 3 galaxy sectors recalibrate themselves to target abstract concepts instead of physical objects. By the end of the day, I had somehow become the galaxy's first official ambassador of beneficial confusion, a position that came with diplomatic immunity, unlimited coffee privileges, and the responsibility to be genuinely perplexed by things in the vicinity of important peace negotiations. "So let me make sure I understand this," I said to Whisper of Stars as we watched the 3 fleets withdraw from their threatening positions. "I'm now professionally confused for the good of interstellar relations." "You're professionally yourself," she corrected, her smile containing enough warmth to power a small star. "Which happens to involve being confused, but in ways that make the universe a safer place for everyone." "And what exactly are we now?" I asked, because the growing connection between us had become something that felt too important to leave undefined. "We're the first human-Etherian bioharmonic partnership," she said, moving closer until the space between us hummed with possibilities. "A living bridge between species, maintained by the quantum resonance between chaos and harmony." "That sounds like it should come with a manual." "The manual," she replied, her pointed ears tilting forward in what I'd learned was the Etherian equivalent of a mischievous grin, "is that there is no manual. We make it up as we go along, trusting that confusion guided by kindness will find its own way to wisdom." Looking back, I realized that somewhere between the assassination attempts and the diplomatic crises, I'd stopped being just a guy who worked with alien technologies and started being someone who helped different forms of consciousness understand each other. Not through expertise or training, but through the simple willingness to admit that most of existence was fundamentally confusing and that was perfectly okay. My apartment's ice maker still doesn't work properly, but now I understand that some problems are more interesting than their solutions. And every morning, when my enlightened coffee maker offers philosophical observations about the nature of caffeinated consciousness, I find myself genuinely curious about what impossible thing might happen today. After all, in a universe where confusion can become a superpower and bewilderment can save civilizations, even broken ice makers might be exactly the way they're supposed to be.